So you've been thinking about moving to Surrey, BC, but you want to learn a little bit more because you've heard mixed reviews and you don't know who or what to believe. Well, the good news for you is that you're in the right place because in this video, I'm going to be covering all of the major pros and cons of living in Surrey, BC. So stay tuned. What's going on, guys? My name's Alex Dunbar and I'm a realtor with RE/MAX Treeland Realty and the Dunbar Real Estate Group based out of the Cloverdale-Langley areas. And in today's video, I'm going to be going over all the pros and the cons of living in Surrey, BC. Now, to preface this, I should let you know that I've lived in Surrey for almost 30 years in multiple different communities, and I've also played sports across the city. So it is very near and dear to my heart, and I do know a lot about each and every area, so I'm going to be as transparent as possible in today's video. So if you don't know, Surrey is the third largest city by landmass and second largest by population in all of BC. The only city ahead of Surrey population-wise is Vancouver. However, Surrey is set to overtake that population within the next 10 years. Now, if you're not from the area, Surrey often gets a bad stigma. Now, this is unfortunate because Surrey is actually a fantastic city overall, but like any other area, there's going to be good and bad. For instance, if we were just to look at the east side of downtown, we probably wouldn't have a very good perception of Vancouver. But of course, as many of us have experienced, there are tons of other great locations in Vancouver itself. Unfortunately, people tend to allow extremes on the negative side overshadow all the great positives. Now, that's not to say that Surrey is this amazing city and we have to put it on a pedestal and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it, but we do need to take a closer look at what the actual evidence says. So let's start this off on the positive end of the spectrum, and that is that Surrey is extremely diverse. Now, this is in regards to all of its different communities, neighborhoods, and the demographics of the people that live here. With a population of over 568,000 people, Surrey is made up of 6 major communities. Now, within each of these communities, there's also several neighborhoods, and you can really find something that's going to suit your needs for everyone. In regards to the demographics, there is a large South Asian community that makes up a big chunk of Surrey's population. Additionally, the recent data also shows that there is a large Chinese and Filipino population as well. This just goes to show how welcoming Surrey is to all sorts of immigrants and people moving into the city. And obviously, as Canadians, that's what we like to be known for. Being so multicultural, Surrey offers a large variety of activities, events, and restaurants. You're never really going to run out of places to go, things to try, or people to meet. There's always going to be a new experience waiting for you just around the corner. Moving on to the next pro, it's the lower cost of living. Now, I say that with quotations because realistically, I can't call it cheap, because it is still expensive. However, in comparison to Vancouver, it is a much lower cost of living. Now, Vancouver itself is actually the most expensive city in all of Canada and number 93 in the world. To give some context here, home prices in Surrey are over 30% less than that of Vancouver. For example, the benchmark price of a detached home in Vancouver is $2.498 million, while in Surrey it's $1.733 million. For a townhome in Vancouver, it would be $1.342 million, whereas in Surrey it's just over $884,000. And for a condo in Vancouver, it would be $807,000, and in Surrey it would be just over $541,000. Moving on to the average rent prices, Surrey is about 30% cheaper than Vancouver on average. So for an unfurnished one-bedroom apartment in Vancouver, the average price would be about $2,500 a month versus just over $1,700 a month in Surrey. A 2-bed apartment in Vancouver would be about $3,600 a month versus $2,200 a month in Surrey. And a 3-bed unit in Vancouver would be about $4,200 a month versus $2,900 a month in Surrey. So as you can see, it's not necessarily cheap in Surrey, but in comparison to Vancouver, it is much more affordable. And moving on to the next pro, it's the excellent community services. All across Surrey, you're going to be able to find multiple community centers, shopping malls, hospitals, non-profit organizations, and public parks and facilities. Because the population of Surrey is growing so quickly, there's been a ton of development going on to accommodate these new people. There are large investments being made into community facilities and resources, and as the fastest growing city in the province, you wouldn't expect anything less. In the past few years alone, there have been multiple new recreation centers put into different communities across the city. A few of those being the brand new Grandview Heights Aquatic Center and the Clayton Heights Recreation Center. Moving on to our next pro, it's the nature and outdoor recreation options. Surrey is known as the city of parks, and for good reason. There's over 800 parks across the city. Additionally, it's home to a couple of great beaches such as Crescent Beach and Blackie Spit. And of course, not far away, White Rock Beach. Some of the most notable parks in Surrey are Tynehead Park, Bear Creek Park, Redwood Park, Fleetwood Park, Cloverdale Athletic Park, Mud Bay Park, and Newton Athletic Park, each having their own unique features to offer, but always something for everyone. So whether you're interested in running, walking, biking, relaxing, or anything else, you're gonna find a spot to do it. And if you love playing sports, there's not gonna be any shortage. Now on to the next pro, and that's the location. So Surrey is extremely centrally located in the Lower Mainland. You're pretty much right in the middle of Vancouver and Abbotsford, being about a 45-minute drive to either, about an hour to Chilliwack, 20 to 25 minutes to White Rock, and just a few minutes further to the border, and several bridges and highways to get you anywhere else that you want to go. Now these numbers are all going to be dependent on which part of Surrey you actually live in and which route you're going to take. For instance, those in South Surrey are probably going to take Highway 99 over the Alex Fraser Bridge if they're heading into Vancouver, whereas those in North Surrey are going to take Highway 1 over the Port Mann. And if you're in Central Surrey, you might be taking the Patella Bridge through New West. Additionally, we have the Sky Train, which starts in Whalley, and this is going to be your fast track into downtown Vancouver or over onto the Canada line. So overall, Surrey gives you pretty easy access to pretty much anywhere you'd like to go. Moving on to the next pro, it's the developments and city improvements. So as previously mentioned, with the growing population, there's significant investments going into developing new homes and resources. There are currently dozens and dozens of new home developments coming into Surrey, so there's lots of options to choose from. And with all this money being dumped into new housing, this is also causing the gentrification of certain parts of the city. Because with this additional housing, there's also money being poured into new resources. So now, some of the neighborhoods that previously had a bad reputation have now been revitalized and have come a long way from where they used to be. For example, the Surrey Central area typically gets a bad rap, but with all this development going on, it's really changed from where it was 10 years ago. And this is why it's so important to keep up with the times and what things are like now and not what they were like before. On to the next pro, it's the access to education. Surrey has recently become a hub for higher education institutions. Though many of the main campuses are located elsewhere, Surrey has branches of institutions such as Simon Fraser University, multiple Kwantlen Polytechnic University campuses, Vancouver Career College, Sprott Shaw College, and a future UBC campus recently announced that will be built in the Surrey Central Whalley area. Because of this, it's made education much more accessible for those in Surrey or surrounding it, as they don't have to commute all the way to Vancouver. Moving on to the last pro, it's the weather. Now if you're from the Lower Mainland, you know we typically get a lot of rain here. But in comparison to the rest of the country, we have some of the mildest weather around. We don't really get the super cold winters, we don't get the overly hot summers, we always fall somewhere in the middle. So we don't get a ton of snow, we typically get maybe a couple days, but usually that snow is gone within a day or two afterwards. And in terms of summers, we don't get an extremely long summer, but we do get to enjoy some quite warm weather when we do get it. And in comparison to some of the surrounding cities such as New West or Pitt Meadows, we actually typically tend to get a little bit less rain. But for the most part, our weather is very similar to that of Vancouver. Moving on to the first con, it's the higher drug and gang related activity. Now, as you may or may not know, Surrey does have a bit of a negative reputation for this kind of stuff. But what you should know is that the majority of this takes place in a few specific locations. As I previously mentioned, Surrey is the third biggest city by landmass in all of BC. So unfortunately, there's a few bad pockets within the city that tend to give it its bad name. But realistically, if you're watching out and avoiding these areas, you're gonna be fine. Surrey does have a lot of low crime areas, however there are a few that are higher than normal. Although this number has actually decreased in 2021. A few of these areas are Whalley, parts of Newton, parts of Guildford, and the downtown location in Cloverdale. These are the parts of the city you typically want to avoid living in, as they have a higher homeless population and higher crime rates. And this is no different from any other major city. Typically in the downtown areas, this is where you're going to find these types of people. But interestingly, Maclean's put out a report last year of the most dangerous places in all of Canada. And guess where Surrey ranked out of 237 cities? 85th. Cities found ahead of Surrey were those such as Abbotsford, Chilliwack, Langley, and Vancouver. When looking at the crime severity index, Surrey was slightly above the average across Canada at 90, where the average was 75, while for the violent crime severity index, which is more important, Surrey was actually below the average across Canada at 77, with the average being 82. So although the crime rates in Surrey are slightly higher than average, if you look at the other cities that it's comparable to, it's really not as bad as people make it seem. But moving on, this ties into our next con of low income and unattractive neighborhoods. So as with many other cities, there are certain neighborhoods that are unattractive or dirty and filled with more homeless and low income people. And although the majority of these people generally aren't disruptive, it's still unappealing aesthetically and otherwise to live in these areas. However, the city is continually investing significantly in housing and community improvements, as well as increasing resources for homeless individuals. Now, as previously mentioned, these are some of the same neighborhoods, such as those being found in Newton, Guildford, downtown Cloverdale, and surrounding the SkyTrain stations. But things have definitely come a long way, and they're only continuing to improve. If you had seen what it looked like only 5 or 10 years ago, you'd be extremely impressed with how much progress we've made. But as much as the city continues to improve, there's always going to be a little bit of that left behind. And they're probably not ever going to be able to really get rid of all of it. Moving on to the next con, it's traffic. Surrey is an extremely busy city when traveling by car, and especially at certain times of day. It can become very time consuming and frustrating depending on where you need to go. So although Highway 1 does run through Surrey, most people are going to have to take different side streets and roads in order to get to their desired location. Many of these roads come with frequent stops and heavy congestion, especially during rush hour. This means that depending on the time of day, it can take you anywhere from 20 to 45 minutes just to get from one side of Surrey to the other. But with a growing city, that's expected. And it's still far better than that of Vancouver. Now, moving on to our next con, it's the poor rapid transit system. So coupled with the traffic issue is the lack of public transportation options. While there are 4 SkyTrain stops within Surrey, they only reach the northern neighborhoods. This means that the rest of the city is left to rely on either buses or their own vehicles. Now, don't get me wrong, there actually are a ton of buses and you can pretty much get anywhere you want to, but they're definitely known for being quite slow. And this is all going to be dependent on what part of the city you live in and where you're trying to get to. For instance, if you live in the Whalley area, it's going to be much easier for you to get downtown. However, if you're living somewhere like Cloverdale or South Surrey, it's probably going to take you much longer. Now, the good news is that they're actually extending the SkyTrain all the way out into Cloverdale and then into Langley. It's still going to be probably 6 or 7 years until they're actually complete, but once this goes in, it's going to make transit a lot easier. Although it's still only going to be easily accessible for a portion of the city. But it's a major step in the right direction. Moving on to the final con, it's that it rains a lot. So once again, if you're familiar with the Lower Mainland and you've already lived here, you know that we get a lot of rain. Now, it's not like it's raining every single day, but during the spring and the winter, we get a lot more rain than other places. And that's how Vancouver is famously known as Rain-couver. Additionally, in the winter time, we lose light around 4 or 4:30. So this means that your days are going to get a lot darker a lot sooner. However, it's not the end of the world, but just something you should keep in mind. So hopefully you enjoyed today's video, and if you did get any sort of value out of it, it'd be much appreciated if you'd hit that like button. And if you are interested in learning more about Surrey and the surrounding communities and cities, you're definitely going to want to give my channel a follow, as I'm putting out new content every single week. And if you are interested in moving to Surrey, or you just have more questions, don't hesitate to reach out, as I'd be more than happy to answer them for you. Just a reminder that I am a residential real estate agent and I can help you in the process of buying or selling. My contact information will be below, so feel free to reach out via text, phone call, email, or however you'd like. Or if you'd like, you can book a 30-minute free introductory consultation with me. You'll be able to find the link for that down below as well. Thanks so much for watching today. We'll see you in the next video.